everyone to the Amsterdam Forest. It's a beautiful location, beautiful day, and we are very excited to invite you all to come and join our live podcast recording. But we're also very excited to be in the Amsterdam Forest, and thank you to the Forest for hosting us here at East Forest Conference. Today we will have a recording of a podcast on the role of citizen science and its relation to well-being and health. And of course, as we're in a forest, we might also dive into the topic of nature there. My name is Kristiaan Kok. I work at the Athena Institute of the Free University, which is just around the corner. And I'm joined today by a wonderful panel. First, we have Sanne Raap, we have Pieter Haasnoot, and we have Nicole Heise, and I will introduce them in a bit. But first, we are in the Amsterdam Forest, and what does that mean? This is a city forest. It's very close to the city. A forest that also serves the city in a way and provides nature experiences to the citizens of Amsterdam. And I think it's very interesting that combining all these values, biodiversity, recreational values, and I think today we'll also discuss about health, can probably be very exciting, but also a bit of a challenge. So that's a topic that we will dive in today. Also in light with making the connection to citizens. So that's where the topic of citizen science comes in. And in the forest, and Pieter is from the forest, and I'm sure you will tell us a bit more about the citizen science that the forest already is working on. Monitoring birds, helping putting rings on owls, creating space for kingfishers. But I guess it's not easy, and we'll hear more about it. Mm-hmm. So we aim for an interactive session. So first we'll have a little bit of an introduction round. But if as an audience member you would like to join in, ask questions, raise comments, just wave your hand and there will be a microphone coming to you, and then we'll happily invite you to join the conversation. As I mentioned, 3 speakers. First, Sanne Raap, all the way from Maastricht. You have a PhD on healthy neighborhoods. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm finishing it up.
Finishing it up.
Yes.
Can you share a bit more about the work you're doing there?
Yes, so our project is about what kind of neighborhoods are beneficial to people living in low-income neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And green spaces and parks are a big part of that, it turns out. So we try to find out what kind of greenery, what kind of activities, what kind of uses, what kind of understandings of green are conducive to the benefit of people and other species living in neighborhoods.
Cool. And I think there's also a relation to citizen science there?
Yes, so we engage people in our project from the beginning. It actually started from a citizen summit in which the social aspect of living in a neighborhood was considered very bad. So the social infrastructure of which parks form a part, actually. So that's where we start, and we take an ethnographic approach, an experimental approach, in which we experiment also with different uses of the green spaces in the neighborhood.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I think we should dive into that as well.
Please.
But first, let us turn to the other guests. Nicole Heise, part-time Germany, part-time Peru. But you're also the president of an NGO in Peru. And could you perhaps share a bit about the work you're doing there?
Yeah, so in 2015 we founded the NGO Ficus Peru, and we are working in social environmental projects. We started in Lima, in underserved areas, so slum areas. Like we started doing compost, we started doing biogardens there. Now we are doing an experimental agroforestry plot in another slum over there. And then we have also been expanding into more national projects in environmental education. Oh, yeah. And we have recently been involved in this new project about nature and health called Nature Lab. Mm-hmm. And that's also why I'm here right now, because Nature Lab is composed by a consortium of 13 different organizations, and one is VU. Mm-hmm. And I have been closely working with them, and I'm here right now.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. Thanks for being here. And just as with Sanne, we'll dive into the project later, definitely. finally, Pieter Haasnoot.
Hello.
From the Amsterdam Forest.
Sure.
You are a team manager on nature and public media.
Yep.
Loosely translated.
Loose, that's good.
So the forest is very active in doing all kinds of projects and also engaging with citizen science, but maybe a bit more general. So what do
About
you
the
do
forest.
for the forest?
Yeah. Well, what I do is not that important, but I work with a lot of teams that do connect with society, like for instance the forestry, but also the media people and the people who organize all the events. So really the connection with society, that's my main drive. The Amsterdam Forest is a really special place because it's a city forest. And the city forest is kind of a modern thing, but it was designed in the beginning of the 20th century to give the new inhabitants, because the city of Amsterdam was really growing, to give the new inhabitants the experience of nature. And that's really the drive still of the forest. So our mission is to put nature in the middle of society and in the middle of personal life.
Yeah.
And you can see it because we are in the middle of an urban environment, like Schiphol. The airport is very, very close. So we're really in an urban environment, not only these days for the city of Amsterdam, but also for the metropolitan area.
Yeah.
And we focus on 4 areas. That's biodiversity, climate change, and health and social well-being.
Yeah.
That's our main focus. That's why we are here.
Yeah. Wow. I know the forest since I was a kid, so it's nice to be here. And but it's great also to focus on these 4 themes, I think. Yeah. And the last 2 themes that you mentioned, like health and well-being. I'm wondering, like, we talk about citizen science. You as a forest team engage in citizen science. You engage in citizen science. What are some of the things that citizen science can bring for health and well-being? What are some of your ideas on that? Maybe Sanne first?
Yeah, I think the first thing it can bring is a certain understanding of what health is and what well-being is. I think as public health scholars, we tend to assume what is beneficial to health, but I think citizen science is a way to find out in how citizens understand, experience health, and that can be done in very different ways, and that also makes up for different kind of parks and different kind of nature experiences.
Oh yeah. And where does nature come in? Open question.
In citizen science, you mean?
To the relation to the well-being.
So I think in my research we looked mostly at a park in a neighborhood, and we found that some citizens prefer like a clean, well-organized park, which is conducive to their peace of mind. They go there to not be disturbed by their worries of daily life. Others are looking for a place to socialize, and again others are looking for a way to kind of interact directly with nature, get their hands dirty, experience nature. Oh, yeah. So the question then becomes, can a park embody all these kind of experiences and understandings, or should there be multiple parks at the same time? I don't know.
It's a nice question.
Yeah, well, I think like doing science and researching in a natural environment can actually have already benefits for your health too. Like even if you are not researching about the benefits of health in this natural environment. So for example, being involved in some conservation actions or being in the park, measuring the trees, identifying species, I think that can also have a benefit for your mental health and well-being.
Yeah. We are very lucky that in the design of the forest, the aspect of physical well-being was already being taken care of. You can see it over here. This is the rowing stretch, and a lot of aspects of the design of the forest relate to what nature can do for you. But on the other hand, on the other side of the design is really the experience of nature itself. So that's really incorporated in the design. And the guy who started it, that's Heise, and then the designers, the city designers and landscapers that worked on it in the 20s and the 30s of the last century, I'm still amazed about what they did. and how modern it is these days and what it does for the city. Really on these aspects, it's good for your mental well-being, it's good for your physical well-being, and we see that in the visitors as well. Some visitors just come to walk their dog or to run or to swim, which is more or less forbidden. But to do all these physical things, but on the other hand, it always gives people a mental experience that's really beneficial for their health.
Yeah, and how do you take that into account in like citizen science? You mentioned doing the science in a natural environment might also be good for your health and well-being as a researcher, but also as a citizen scientist then perhaps?
Yeah, and like for example, even with kids, I think like mostly they learn, at least in Peru, like they learn about environment and nature in four walls. So making them participate on city science projects can help them really get into contact with nature. So for example, there's like apps like iNaturalist where you can like photograph some species, and they were actually being in contact with nature thanks to those kind of activities than otherwise they will just learn in four walls in the classroom. So and I think that like that really helps you to get into contact with nature, that it's something that we are really lacking in the present days.
Yeah, well, in citizen science there are two words, and we have no problems to connect with citizens. We have a lot of volunteers that work in the forest, but because it's so logical and so incorporated in our tradition, we now need to make the connection to science, because we have a lot of volunteers that work in all sorts of fields in the forest, and now we would like to scale up. We would like to scale up on a scientific base. So how can we really benefit society even more? So that's why we are looking for a research agenda and more connection with science, with guys like you and you guys, to really scale up in a scientific way. Because the aspect of getting volunteers and getting citizens to connect with us, that's easy, that's in our tradition. It's in our workforce, it's in our organization, it's in our volunteer organization, so that's really working. But now we need the connection with the research agenda.
And when you say scale up the scientific knowledge base, what does that mean? What do you want to know?
Well, for instance, of course we are a forest and we are open to everybody, so everybody can visit us. But we would really like to facilitate in a perhaps technical way, like we now just started a meditation app, so you can buy app. We facilitate the silence and the meditation that nature could also bring to you. And we would like to know what does it bring to people. So we are doing it, we are facilitating it, but are we doing it in the right way? Do we need it in another way? So that's really what we are looking for.
Oh yeah. And I think Sanne, is that also something that you have seen in the other green spaces that you're working in? Is there this sort of need, or you feel the need to strengthen the knowledge base with knowledge from citizens as well? Or?
I think citizens already know quite a lot, and I think in cooperation we can learn more. So I think in my case we see that citizens already have quite a lot of ideas about how nature benefits their health and what they might change in their environment so they will be more healthy. But what I think is most interesting is that citizens and we together also discover that meeting other people in the park and thinking about the environment not as just for you, but sharing it with other people, with other plants and trees, really kind of, we developed an idea of more collective health. So, and I think that aligns also with more urban sociology traditions in which the park is also seen as a potential equalizer. The park is where every type of person from the city comes, so ill, healthy, rich, poor, with all kinds of different backgrounds. So I think ideally we are kind of reformulating this old ideal in which we go to the park to meet peers and interact with them, which is beneficial to our health as well.
We are really also focusing on like public health in general, like what does the forest do for the quality of the air in the city? Like how could we provide even more biodiversity that's needed in our world? So that the public health side is also very important to us. So we make the division between individual health and public health as well.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting how a park can strengthen like these kind of public goods, because there are a lot of public goods that need to be strengthened and yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And if I can be, so you want to comment as well?
Yeah, no, just like when you were saying about like science, right? Like, and that you were saying like upscaling maybe to the science standards. So like, for example, for the Nature Lab project, what we want to do is like influence on the public health. And they are very rigorous about what is it scientific evidence and what's not. So, for example, there we have to be very rigorous in our methodology, and citizens cannot really. I think they have less chance of saying like we want to measure this or that. You know, we have our questionnaires that we have to measure. We have some indicators we have to measure, and they can get involved. And of course, they are the main providers of the information, because we are doing the nature-based therapies with them. But they cannot really change much of the design on this case. But there are other cases. So, for example, that we have been working where the citizens or the students that we're working with the schools, they can actually design their whole project, and we as scientists, we can maybe give them some tips on what to adjust and so on, but it's mainly their project, right? And it responds to their questions, to their interest, and I think like both approaches are necessary and might be it might be different, like depending on the objective of this citizen science project, or like if you're looking at them as someone giving you information mostly, or are they directing the whole research? I think it can vary a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because indeed, maybe in a very narrow sense, you can say citizen science is citizens providing data, right? But how, maybe the other example that you shared of the school, where citizens are also in charge of designing. Can you share a bit more? I'm curious. What does that look like?
Yeah, so we have been implementing this project called Ethnobiolab, and we are working with science teachers in schools so that they teach about environment, but also with an intercultural approach. So we want to also recover local knowledge, traditional knowledge. And the students can kind of like design their own investigation project. Like it will depend a lot on the region, on what topic they are working on. But for example, there was this group of students. We gave them the broad topic of biodiversity, and then they reflect about like what are the causes of biodiversity loss and so on, and they started doing like interviews and so on, like they collecting their information about biodiversity loss in their area. Then they chose one particular plant, it's our national flower actually, and they did like a whole campaign. Okay, how can we promote that this plant is more protected? So then they also planted it in public areas. They investigated about their benefits, about how this plant must be protected, and did a whole plantation of this plant around the city. And there's other ones doing more, for example, on water. So they also we gave them some of the indicators that we suggested they should consider, but they also like decided by themselves what indicators they want, and if they want to focus it more like on physical indicators, or for example more on a social science way, like what are the barriers to actually have a clean river, for example, next to your house. Like, what are the reasons? And that's also citizen science, right?
Yeah. Is that something to think about for the forest, Pieter?
Yes, sure, to think about it. But I think we are a bit two-sided in these things. Like, we are a very strong design, and that needs an almost undemocratic approach. And on the other hand, we are really into connecting with the citizens around us. But the tradition about the undemocratic design is stronger than getting connected with people and making people participate in other fields in the design, because we have a lot of volunteers working on monitoring biodiversity, and their influence is really big because they can work via scientific protocols and then they contribute to science. But doing it in other fields, like designing things or also all the aspects of the forest, we need to grow in that, I think.
Yeah, and this is very interesting, I think, that you mentioned that, because it makes me wonder why is there then at some point a decision, this is really nice for citizen science, and this is something that we're going to decide by ourselves. How should we determine that boundary?
We more or less make the division between, is it science or not? And when it's science, we need protocols, and we need to really to do it in a scientific way. And for us, the other activities are more like, that's participation of volunteers. So we label it ourselves. We do not label it as science. Okay. But we do a lot of participation with volunteers. And it could also be labeled as science, I don't know. So for us, let's ask
the scientists, can it be labeled as science?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's where citizen science becomes interesting. So I think there's a lot of citizen science where citizens contribute as data collectors. They are doing a contribution, so they becoming more scientists. Whereas if you talk about citizen science, to me that's also about democratization. So that's also about science embracing change and embracing also new sorts of, you can call it epistemologies or local knowledge or ways of viewing into their scientific practice. So it's a potential transformation for science. And that's where it gets really interesting. So that's where we get new ideas about what well-being and what a park could be.
I think that's very interesting. We are on the brink between the two. So, and it's also because of the scale. So we are very, very big, and all decisions have an enormous impact. And the original historic design is very strong and very overpowering. So we really have to, when it's small and in a small topic, then it's okay. But when it's a big change and a big design, then we are not that citizen science based as yet.
Well, maybe
but
citizens
we can
think
work
it's
on
good
that.
as it is. It could be an outcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know, for Ficus, for example, when we work with the science teachers, we try to broaden their idea of what is science, and we usually do this distinction of like, okay, this is Western science, like, or traditional science, but this is also science, like, and just like the idea of investigating something and creating knowledge that you can generate some evidence, like that is part of a science, right? Like if you are observing something and then making conclusions, that's also part of science. And so we also try to bring like local knowledge to be at the same level kind of science, or at because I don't know, but about much here, but in Peru, what happens a lot is like if it's not scientifically validated, then it's not valid. And a lot of our local knowledge, especially about our environment, it's not scientifically validated yet. So I think it's important to reflect on the concept of science too. Yeah,
we feel this tension as well. And the interesting thing is that's not a tension between the organization of the forest and the citizens that participate, but it's also within the participants. So like the expert group of volunteers that follow the scientific protocols for monitoring biodiversity, they do not accept other people that just use waarneming.nl or other platforms that you can put all your information on. So it's also something to grow in together, also with the participants and the volunteers we already have, and also with the scientists.
And I think there's spaces to grow, and like you have to choose where to fight what battles, right?
Exactly.
Like, there's spaces where you can actually discuss about the science and bring citizens into generating their own research idea and so on. And there's spaces where this is not so much possible. So, for example, I was talking about Nature Lab project. if we start opening too much, then we lose this scientific rigorous, and then we cannot pitch it to the health system, and it's not gonna be never covered by insurance. So like,
so there's a challenge there for science, I think, and I think you also mentioned maybe, I think Sanne, you've mentioned science needs to transform, and I do feel that we're a little bit hopeful about some initiatives happening, but we're also not close. So where are we in the transformation? What are your ideas on that?
Well, I understand that science needs to sell itself. We need funding. Some citizens might also be attracted by this standard idea of science, right?
Yeah.
So,
like the volunteers also, right? Pieter?
So they want to do real science. And I think that's a tension you need to negotiate. But I think you have so many volunteers, and when they are here working for so many years, they're developing so many kinds of insights that I think you need to do something with that. You need to start mapping and asking them about that. And I think then projects will emerge. I think you cannot really design it beforehand, but I think that's a great starting point.
Yeah. We are more or less, that's our starting point, more or less reconnecting with the volunteers in this way. Because there are a lot of volunteers working from their own passion, and they're doing great things also in a scientific way. But now as a forest, we are reconnecting them to see if we can travel this road together.
And Nicole, you also mentioned that maybe to travel this road together, sometimes the spaces are there for it, and sometimes it's more difficult.
Yes.
Do you have like examples or strategy how you try to bring that together?
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, we work with the science teachers, right? And maybe it's not what you would imagine, that they are the most open to discuss the concept about science. But I think what we did, for example, was show them like good experiences and good examples, and they really liked that, and they started opening their mind and see like, oh, okay, like they saw a project, for example, of frogs that are in danger of extinction, and they thought like, oh, okay, maybe we can also look at our biodiversity around there, and this project of the frogs was very connected with the traditions and the myths around this frog, and they saw how there was this connection and how this make it maybe more interesting for the kids, and like then they start like thinking, okay, bringing traditional knowledge into science is interesting. Making the children participate in these kind of projects can actually make a difference on the outside the school and so on. So I think like first you really need to giving good examples really open the minds of people, but then also there's some places where, okay, like your objective is to make something very rigorous. I don't know, cannot say the word, sorry, but I think you get me. Then maybe that's not the best time to start discussing about involving citizens for that particular research. But you can still involve them in maybe small tasks. I don't know, like we're also trying to do that. So, for example, we have to record bird species, and we hired a specialist on bird watching, but we are taking the kids to also do the bird watching experience. And we're gonna compare also the results, and so on. So
great.
That's nice. I have a follow-up question, but I also want to check again because I haven't seen any hands in the audience yet, but there is a microphone traveling around if there are questions or people want to jump into the discussion. So I'm just opening the floor again to see whether that's the case. And otherwise, I first ask another question to Pieter, which is, you mentioned, right, we want to collaborate with science.
Absolutely,
we
for us, the challenge in citizen science is not in the citizen part, but in the science part. And that has nothing to do with science. It's probably our own fault. But the connection between the first, it's a big a laboratory of 1,000 hectares. So and we are neighbors. So let's do projects together. And we are now discussing 2. That's not a lot. So I'm really inviting the audience, but all the people here, to come up with projects we can do together.
I think
we're
that's
really
a
into
wonderful
it.
idea. It's a wonderful idea. And I think it can bring a lot.
I think so too.
And maybe just to quickly follow up, so I think it's also, you say it's probably partly our fault, but I think it's also definitely on the science side. So
Absolutely.
what would you need from scientists? What do you
Well,
hope to?
I think first of all
Yeah.
we need to brainstorm, and then we can create projects from there. We are now discussing with Jolanda Maas of VU to see if we can really investigate the relation between health and nature. We are participating in a project that's investigating small muggen, I don't know the English word for
Mosquitoes?
mosquitoes that carry DNA that comes from Schiphol, the airport. So because they're in the forest, because we are close to the airport. So all these kind of things, we can do a lot of projects.
Yeah.
Let's start.
And are you inviting the scientists to come have a look here?
Absolutely.
I think that's the start of
Yeah.
many
We are
great
more and more.
projects potentially.
We are more and more doing it. We had a kind of phase a few years that we were really a bit focused on ourselves, and we are now really opening up also to science. We are looking into, can we make a scientific board? Can we do certain projects that we invite people to join us? So we are really opening up to the scientific world.
I just want to add, like, sometimes also citizen science can start a research, and maybe if you need more rigorous evidence, like, okay, they can do it with all the protocols, but citizen science can also be like the first step for many research, and especially in areas where we don't have enough information. I think it's a good starting point for
Absolutely,
science.
and to give it a low threshold.
Yeah.
Really,
Yes.
it's close. We can just do it together.
Can I add that I think
Yeah.
some warning for the about the danger of like this rigorous research. So I think before you asked us also about like a citizen science project that failed. I think, and I was thinking I think it's only fair to think about my own project. So we had some students participating in the neighborhood. As good students, they did like a thorough literature search, and they came up with this evidence-based intervention with a kitchen garden, a creation of a kitchen garden in the park. So people would grow their own food and everything, and that looked very promising. And then they actually had some meetings with people in the neighborhood, and they met with another local kitchen garden association, which was just in a nearby neighborhood, and they got really, really angry with them.
Oh.
Because they said what we don't need is a competition. We already struggle to find members ourselves.
Yeah.
So here I think it was an interesting lesson for us and for the students in the first place that, I mean, there's lots of literature about evidence-based interventions. Doesn't mean that it's the right intervention for your park or for your nature area, right? So for me, science is not the starting point. The place and the people there are the starting point. Of course, you can go to nature or to go to science, but it's not necessarily the best way to start a citizen science project. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, I think. Very important, yeah. I'm also looking a little bit towards the time. So maybe to round off, because I think this is a really, really important reflection, to be maybe a bit humble as science as well, not to jump into places and think, oh, we are going to do science or citizen science because it will do something good, but to really be grounded in the place where it's all happening. We are now at the place where many things are happening. So as a final question to all of you, so you can think about it a bit when the others are answering. You mentioned already it's like, how many hectares here?
1,000.
1,000 hectares.
It's big.
So-
it's one of
so-
the biggest city forests in the world. It's
There we
much
go.
bigger than Central Park.
Much bigger than Central Park. And I know I just mentioned we should be humble, but now we're going to think a bit big. So
Yeah, think
imagine
big.
that we have 1,000 hectares and we can use it all to do citizen science, like a big living laboratory. What would be sort of the dream project or dream idea that what we could do here together?
I would like to really know, in a questionnaire or something that sounds dull and boring, but what motivates people to come here, and what brings the forest to them? What does it do for their mental and physical health? And for physical health, sometimes it's quite clear, but for mental health, it's very diverse, and we would really like to facilitate the health of people. So if we know more about what brings them here and what they get from it, we are happy.
So I can give a very small example again from my own research, again conducted by one of the students who took the initiative for a diary of the park. So this diary was passed on by people living nearby and using the park. And the diary is not only used for description of what happened in the park, but also experiences, memories, hopes for the park. So I think something similar can be done on a much bigger scale, and then you can kind of map not only what a park means to people already, but what it could mean and how it can bring people together in a different way. So
Nice.
Sounds interesting. Come to our scale.
I saw a research where they asked people to write like poems or story about a park, and then they were analyzing the cultural ecosystem services the park brings. I thought it was. I think it's really nice when they use this literary. Sorry, I'm forgetting the words, but like artistic expression to understand like what people value from a park or from a green area.
Interesting.
Yeah, and
Can I have 2 dreams? Can I have 2 dreams?
Yes.
Another one is
course.
because we are
We can have
getting
many
stronger
dreams.
and stronger in nature education for children, because I think it's very, very important to really put nature also in the center of life of children.
Yeah.
And I think we need more research and more scientific background in what good nature education is. So that would be another one.
That's also a good dream.
Yep.
Any other dreams?
Well, for me, I think like it will be a place, a forest, where the administration is open to hear what the citizens are interested to research, and they can propose their ideas to research, and they get support from the administration to do so. Because I don't know, in Peru, many times, like even for measuring a tree, even if there's not much biodiversity, it's like an urban park with a few trees, and just to measure it, you have to go through a whole very difficult bureaucratic process, and maybe they will say no for no reason. So I think that's also very important, that the administration is supportive of the interest of the citizens.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah. Many dreams, Sanne? Yeah.
well, I think maybe to add to that, I think a park can also be a place to ask citizens for input and for ideas, also to integrate nature more in the city as a whole, right? So here, nature is already quite successfully integrated in the city, but I think the rest of the city, in the face of climate change, heat stress, and all these kind of things, needs more nature. So
Absolutely.
how do we do that in a way that doesn't bother people and allows for biodiversity, etc.?
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's a challenge. It's, I must say, not my challenge, because
Another challenge for you.
another challenge. I'm part of the forest, but it's a challenge for the municipality. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think with that call to action, maybe for the municipality, it's nice to end on that note. I think we have taken more steps in the direction of making sure that science and the forest will continue collaborating, and much more in the future,
really
because
like
it's
that.
it's such a central and important place in the city, actually. The forest.
Absolutely.
We think it's outside, but it's also part of it. So with that, Sanne, Nicole, Pieter, thanks a lot for sharing your insights and thoughts.
It was a pleasure.
We are going to enjoy this wonderful festival, and there will be another podcast recording a little bit later on today.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
the festival. Thank you very
See
much.
you soon.
Thank you.